Do you remember US President Obama visiting the Cape Coast Castle in Ghana in 2009? Now, you might be wondering, what on earth does that have to do with Sweden? Well, Cape Coast, which was originally named Cabo Corso by the Portuguese, was once the largest slave trading center in West Africa. It initially traded gold before it became a hub for the transatlantic slave trade. About 40 slave castles, trading posts, and forts were built in Ghana, but the biggest of them is Cape Coast Castle, which is one of Ghana's major tourist attractions today. So what exactly happened at Cape Coast Castle, and how's that related to Sweden and Swedish slave trade? Let's find out. And for this, let's go back to the 1640s. In the middle of the 1640s, Louis de Geer, who was a Dutch-Swedish entrepreneur, lobbied to use his company under the Swedish flag to enter the Gold Coast, which is now Ghana, and establish a colony there. But the Swedish court leadership was unsure if they could trust him, and the initiative fell into oblivion. In 1646, de Geer felt he'd waited too long, was tired of it, and sent a merchant ship to what is today Nigeria. The crew of the ship bought ivory and 260 African slaves there. The ship's next stop was in present-day Barbados, where they sold the 150 surviving slaves in exchange for sugar and tobacco, which were exotic goods in 17th century Sweden. When the ship returned to Gothenburg, Sweden in 1647, it had proven that Swedish slave trade was economically viable. 4 African slaves were also on board the ship, and de Geer bestowed them upon Chancellor Axel Oxenstierna. Just like that, the Swedish crown saw the potential in the slave trade. In 1649, after 2 more voyages with other ships, de Geer finally received permission from Queen Christina to form a Swedish trading company. In December of the same year, the Swedish Africa Company was founded. Louis de Geer was responsible for the majority of the funding, although many leading Swedes gave legitimacy to the project by supporting it with their names. One of de Geer's most important partners was Henrik Karloff, who was a German fortune hunter who had previously worked for Dutch trading companies in Brazil and West Africa. As a former high-ranking officer of the Dutch, Karloff had the friendly relations with the local chiefs necessary to establish a trading post. In 1650, Karloff succeeded in getting the permission of the King of Fidu to establish a fort at Cabo Corso, which means Short Cape in Portuguese, and Karloff established this fort for the Swedish Africa Company. And Cabo Corso was an area in present-day Ghana, and the Swedish Africa Company wanted to buy land there. In May 1650, the Swedish Africa Company and the King of Fidu signed the contract. Then, at Cabo Corso, the Swedish Africa Company began the construction of a fortress that would be named Fort Karlsborg. They named it after the Swedish heir to the throne and Queen Christina's successor, Karl X Gustav. 169 African slaves helped to build it. When it was ready, Sweden could fully enter the slave trade. The mission was clear. They would exchange Swedish iron and copper for enslaved Africans. They would exchange enslaved Africans to sugar, tobacco, and other luxury products the Swedish elite craved. But, wait a minute. Before we move on with the story from Sweden's perspective, let's take a moment to take a closer look at the castle itself and what it meant for the enslaved Africans. In Fort Karlsborg, or Cape Coast Castle as it's called today, the underground dungeon was a space of terror, death, and darkness. This stood as a direct juxtaposition to the European living quarters and commanding heights of the administrative quarters above, who lived relatively luxuriously. The basement of this imposing fortress was often the last memory slaves had of their homeland before being shipped off across the Atlantic, as this signified the beginning of their journey. Let's return to De Geer's story. The problem he faced was that the European powers guarded their interests in the Atlantic and could exclude Sweden, which still lacked a colony in the Caribbean. As a result, there was no market for the slaves shipped from Cabo Corso, nor could they be exchanged for the sugar and tobacco they so desperately wanted to import into Sweden. The solution was found on an island off the coast of Gabon, today known as Sao Tome and Principe. In the 1650s, the island was ruled by the Portuguese and characterized by sugar plantations in need of new slaves. Sweden had found its trade partner, and in the coming years, they shipped Karlsborg slaves to the island in exchange for sugar and other goods. In 1657, another contract was signed, which meant the Swedish Africa Company would ship between 500 and 600 slaves to the Dutch Caribbean colony of Curacao. A downside with the Portuguese was that their need for slaves on Sao Tome and Principe was limited, which hampered Sweden's income. At the same time, competition in the area was bloody. Swedish merchant ships were often hijacked, and the Netherlands, Denmark, and England all fought to increase their influence in the region. In 1663, Sweden was finally forced out of West Africa. The Netherlands took over Cabo Corso. How did that happen? Well, remember Karlov? Karlov had returned to Europe in 1655, leaving Johan Philip von Krusenstjerna in charge of Karlsborg. Louis de Geer had died in the meantime, and Karlov got himself involved in a serious dispute with his heirs. In Amsterdam, he convinced merchants to give a financial injection to the Danish West India Company, for which he set sail to the Gold Coast in 1657, with the goal in mind to capture for Denmark the Swedish lodges and forts he himself had established. With the help of the Dutch, Karlov succeeded in driving the Swedes out, leaving the Gold Coast on the captured ship Stockholm Slott, and with von Krusenstjerna on board as a prisoner. Karlov had left Samuel Smith, also a former employee of the Dutch West India Company, in charge of Karlsborg. The Dutch were able to convince Smith in 1659 of the rumor that Sweden had conquered Denmark, upon which Smith rejoined the Dutch West India Company, and he handed over all Danish possessions to the Dutch. The King of Sweden didn't like that at all, and he prevented the Dutch from taking possession of the fort. A year later, the king decided to sell it back to the Swedes. After the king died in 1663, though, the Dutch were able to occupy the fort, and that's where this story of untold Swedish history ends. Oh. But let me tell you one more thing. The historians estimate that Sweden shipped around 1,000 enslaved Africans from Cabo Corso. And, as I said at the beginning of this video, Fort Karlsborg, or Cape Coast Castle, still stands in Cape Coast, Ghana today as a cruel reminder of the atrocities which took place there. This information came from these websites. You'll find these links below this video. If you found this video interesting, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel and watch this series from the start. In 6 weeks, I'll be back. I'll be back with a new video in my series on LGBTQ+ related topics. Till then, I only want to say 3 things. Thank you for watching. Have a great summer, and bye for now.